first minute. Just look at this.
Can you believe there's still a minute and a half to go in the...
You put your life on the line when you get in the ring. And that's the bottom line, because somebody is trying to kill you. And the object of boxing is to render the other guy unconscious.
But it's always been, to me, I think, the biggest mirror of our society. At its best, it's balletic. At its worst, it's brutal.
A caveman can understand boxing. It's something very visceral. It's something, a part of us, part of the human dynamic.
Human beings are actually brutal people in terms of what they like to watch. When the bell rings, it's just obvious one guy to go out and beat the other one up. It's barbaric, but people love that. It's still the epitome of excitement.
I mean, people love to see blood. You know, let's face it, I mean, we're going back to the Roman days when the queen went like this.
Man against man, me against you, one-on-one. It's just the basics of the struggles that we all have.
It does tell us something about the human condition in a snapshot, in some ways. It's got all of that kind of drama. And that life itself is a contest, and it is a struggle.
We go to war, there's fights over religion, so we fight every day over a lot of different things.
I think we all need a kind of a release for violence. If we can't practice in our own lives, we watch somebody else practice.
Part of it is thrill-seeking. We're looking for a jolt. We're looking to get turned on. And notice how it's much more men than it is women. And it's because men in general have a little bit lower activity in their brain.
The crowd wants knockouts. And that's why they're there. And that's when they will be yelling the loudest.
Thousands of people chanting your name. I mean, I've never experienced it, but in talking to some of the guys I've worked with, they say it's just intoxicating. It's unbelievable, the power that that has.
The last thing on your mind is what's going to happen to me or him. And it's that warrior mentality that you live in the moment, and the moment is about victory, and it's about delivering pain.
Stepping into that ring, and you know, at what point are you making the decision about putting yourself at risk? When a boxer gets into that system, gets onto that conveyor belt, at what point does he cease to be in control of his own body?
When a fighter puts his life on the line, really, because the possibility of injury is there. I don't know how people can walk away and not think twice about what happens to the fighters and their families beyond the ring.
It's sad that people don't know what's going on in the sport of boxing. There's another side of boxing that people should know about.
Phil. Phil, look at me. Come on, Chip. Come on, Chip. Look at me. Hey, look at me. We gotta get. Can I get you something to drink? No, I'll get it for you. I'll get it for you. What would you like? Some water or some juice? Juice? Okay. Just a minute. I'll get you some. Stay here.
Most people in the Portland area refer to them as the Moyer Boys. Personally, I didn't know much about Denny and Phil prior to them coming here because they're definitely a different generation than I am, but it's actually quite fascinating.
We were one of the very first people on the block that had a television set. Wow. So I would sit in the living room and listen to my dad scream and yell come on, Denny, hit him again. And finally, Oregon had somebody who represented us who was a world champion. And he was a young, good-looking guy. You know, I can remember seeing him on the television and thinking, whoa.
On the other side of the ring, we have the youthful Dennis Moyer being worked over by his veteran trainer.
Let's take a look at this handsome young guy. He's only 20 years old. He's been in a gym since he was 12. We last saw him in a racetrack in Portland, Oregon, when he boxed Don Jordan and went 15 rounds. His father, Harry Moyer, was a top amateur on the coast, and his uncle Tom was also a boxer. His brother Phil is a middleweight.
You start them from this age here and right on up. What else do they think they know? My grandfather, my great-grandfather, my dad's doing it, my brother's doing it, and now I got a chance to do it, I'm going to do it. Didn't have a mother, so Harry had raised them both.
Harry was so good with them. He trained them. Couldn't ask for a better trainer. Always looked out after their welfare. Always. That was number one.
I went to Central Catholic High School, as did Denny. And in those days, he was very well known because he's a great Golden Gloves boxer then. I think he might have been a champion then. Great fighter, God, even as a kid, 14 years old.
We were both so young, you know, and that was the thing to do. Here you are, a young kid, and everybody's interested in your boxing, whether you make any money or not.
Phil Moyer was terribly good-natured and extraordinarily tough guy when he had to be, and so we had a common bond. I don't know what lured Phil into the professional ranks. Maybe it was Denny's success.
Phil would have liked to have done the football. He really liked football, but Harry wanted him to stick with boxing, so he stayed with the boxing.
Well, I didn't want them to turn pro, but they wanted to, so what can you do? Flaherty was in town, and he was promoting here, and he told them they'd make a lot of money, you know, on this.
But Sid Flaherty was a very enterprising manager who could get his fighters, maneuver them into places. And that's what a manager's supposed to do, get them fights. At what price, Glory, I know not.
Fighters come and go, managers stay on forever.
Without the fighter, you are out of business.
Fighters are dirt.
Let's not argue with him, Eddie. If fighters are dirt, what are managers made of?
Flaherty knew his business. He had a good line for these young kids. That's being in the spotlight. And they knew they were good, both of them. Denny signed first, and then Phil signed, and I think it was soon after that they turned pro that Flaherty kind of moved Harry out. What could he do? He's not the manager. He's not paying him. Harry kind of lost control. And then after that, it really got bad.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you. Introducing to you first, the IBF heavyweight champion of the world, Chris Byrd. And his opponent across the ring is riding out of Denver, Colorado, by way of our nation's capital, Deverell Williamson.
Let me tell you, it's all over, man. Take a deep breath, bite down, and go get it. You understand me? These people tell you how you feel, man. How do you feel? You want it? Go get it. You understand me? You gotta put him out. Coil up, get your hands going, let him go. Don't stop.
One thing Deverell Williamson can't do is back up in round 12, and that's exactly what he's doing. He should be attacking.
Well, it's too little, too late as we head for the bell. Ladies and gentlemen, after 12 rounds of action, we have a unanimous decision. All three in favor of the winner, and still champion, Chris Byrd.
And Deverell Williamson unsuccessful in his first world title shot.
saw my boyfriend talking to the prettiest girl.
It's been good. It's just been busy, and I just want some time off because the kids are just in activity after activity, and we just don't have a whole lot of quality time with us. For me, the safety of my husband is my first priority. Just with the small injuries, with the hands or a cut over the eye, or DeBarrel, he had a broken jaw. It's just there are places you go in your mind that you don't want to go, And like I think I've said before, my biggest fear is taking that plane ride home by myself. I can't do that. And now with him, it's getting late in the game. He's 38, and I don't care if we're living in a cardboard box. I would rather have my husband than any amount of money in the world, than anything that boxing could ever offer me or give to me.
To look at DeBarrel, you wouldn't even think he was a fighter. Most people don't think he's a fighter. And a lot of the people that I introduced him to, friends and business associates, didn't want to watch him fight because they couldn't stand to see the guy get hit because he's too nice of a guy. But DeBarrel's good at flipping the switch and, turning into the guy he needs to turn into in the ring.
Boxing is like, having a bad girlfriend, a girl that's not good for you. You know you shouldn't be dating her or hanging out with her, and you keep calling her back. You keep calling her back. Once you get a taste of leather across your chin, it's something about you just tell you, keep coming back in there. You know you don't have any business in there, and you're always searching for that perfect round, that perfect sparring session where, hey, I did everything perfect. Tiger Woods searching for that perfect golf game, or even a junkie searching for that ultimate high.
Everything in my life's a fight. I make it a fight, whether it's there or not. You get up, you're tired, you're sore, I don't care, you go to the gym. That's been my drug, and it's a drug that I can't give up. And then when I spar, when you're chopping down a tree and you can see a nick in that tree and then you start to see the more of the nicks, that's good. So when I nail a girl or a sparring part, whatever, in the face or the body, you can see in grimace, that's good. You see a little blood, that's good. That's like chopping that tree.
Crazy dedication, crazy dedication. She just loves fighting, and she just wants to be the best fighter that she can be. So whatever she has to do to achieve that, she'll do it. And if she thinks what you're saying makes sense, she'll do it. She'll spend all day doing it. You got to tell her to stop, quit, go home. Not just female fighters. A lot of fighters can learn things off cows.
Hey, so check this out. Earlier this year, on Best Damn, I worked the fight. You hit this girl and put a big knot over the left side. Have you ever seen anything like that when you hit somebody that hard? Is that the first time you ever gave somebody a big, God?
Big goose egg?
Yeah.
Your size, obviously, nobody at your size wants to fight you. So usually you have to put on weight, do anything you can to get a little bigger, usually go up in weight class to fight girls that'll fight you.
Yeah.
Is that a problem for you?
I'm a 120-pound girl. I'm ready for any of these girls. I'm ready for anybody. Whatever they got, the harder it is, the better it is for me. So I ain't trash.
That is reason enough to watch her fight July 12th here on Best Damn. Kelsey Jeffries, thank you very much.
That's my first world title at 122. Even today, I've had 42 professional fights. I'm two-time world champion, but it's not enough. I gotta keep going. There's just like no end. It's constantly gotta get better. There's never gonna be where I get the top, but then I'm just like, finally I've arrived. Because I would have arrived at that world title, I didn't. And I would have arrived at that one, but it didn't. We got room for more though.
Tony has a hard time remembering, so I've really got to check on him a lot, more so than probably any of the other people. Once he's done it, like, let's say, 15 to 20 times, he pretty much can get it.
Tony was a good all-around athlete, and he excelled because he dedicated himself to it. No matter what phase of his athletic, from Little League football, basketball, and then to junior high school football, he worked out more than any other athlete on his teams. In his junior year at the University of Colorado, they had a very informal boxing club structured at the university. At the time, I tried to discourage him from it. It was a challenge that he wanted to try.
I told him from the beginning I thought it was terrible. Why did he want to go into the ring and get his beautiful face all smashed?
We met at CU, and actually in the ring, we were training together. And I met him, I believe, by sparring with him. He was a very bright, brilliant, very kind-hearted, go-get-'em type of person.
He sparred actually and trained with Jeff quite a bit. These guys were gym buddies. They both kind of came at it from different directions. I think Jeff was more of the guy who was trying to prove himself in life, who had been beaten up a little bit in school and saw this as a way to sort of punch through that image he carried of himself. Tony, on the other hand, is more of the intellectual who's using this as a way to better himself because he wanted to push his grade level up.
Tony was getting ready for the CU Smoker. He was really turning up the heat on his training quite a bit, and he wanted to spar as much as he could. Most of our sparring equipment was missing, so we were sparring each other with bad gloves that had tears and rips in them. He was very easy to hit, unfortunately. He would take far too many shots in order to attempt to get in whatever punches he could.
You get two young men in the ring, even though they're friends, even though they're supposed to be in there for training purposes, and they get carried away. They don't hold back.
Tony's just taken a lot of punches. Jeff's a big hitter back then. Who knows what punch it was? Maybe it was multiple punches that did it, but somewhere within that sparring match, he injured Tony and caused 2 blood vessels to begin leaking really in his brain.
He complained of a really bad headache at the end of the 4th round. As we were walking down to the training room, he said that his right side, his entire right side went numb. And I remembered putting his other arm over my neck and helping him to walk because he no longer had control of one of his arms and one of his legs. The kid who was running the training room decided to give him an aspirin, which was a very bad thing, as it turns out, because he had developed a brain bleed that night, and aspirin was just going to make him bleed harder.
I think it's the most civilized of sports because it recognizes the innate aggression that still exists and should exist, because it's that same aggression and compulsion that drives us to do all the good things that we do in life, as long as that aggression is channeled properly. Since the onset of gloves in the latter part of the 19th century, the sport became respectable. It was established as a sport and became legal. And from the period from the early 1900s right through to the 1950s, it was one of the most popular sports, certainly in Britain and all over the world.
See, there was only 3 major sports back then. You know, it was baseball with Babe Ruth, and horse racing, and boxing. Boxing back in the 20s was really popular. We did a thing on Carpentier and Dempsey. 91,000 people were there. That fight was so big. And the New York Times, and the next day, had headlines, you know, across the front page about the fight, you know, who won. On the left-hand side, there was another column, had nothing to do with boxing. It was President Harding signing a peace agreement to end World War I. The New York Times thought Carpentier and Dempsey was more important than ending the World War I.
The sport went through periods when a number of doctors and politicians decided to campaign against the sport. So then after the Second World War, we had this continual debate, should boxing be acceptable in a civilized society?
A comprehensive national investigation of boxing was suggested on August 25, 1959, when Governor Edmund G. Brown of California stated that boxing, quote, smells to high heaven.
Those that would defend boxing say, well, it's the noble art of self-defense. Okay, boys, if it's the noble art of self-defense, why do you keep hitting each other?
The American middleweight champ, Tommy Nelson, takes it on the chin. His opponent was warned by the referee, who's outside the ring, to stop slugging the unconscious Nelson. Claiming he didn't hear the ref's warning, Arthur Howard is not disqualified.
What upsets people about boxing is, unlike motor racing or horse racing or climbing Mount Everest, 2 people actually set out to hit each other.
This fist, this muscle, it's like a hammer, and it hits a person's head.
There are loads of sports where the head can suddenly come into contact with an immovable object. The problem boxing has is that the element of intent is there. The boxer will intentionally hit his opponent to the head.
The intent is to knock the other person out. And we don't intently want to hurt somebody, but we know that it's possible.
You have this argument about intention. Does that mean that you intend to hurt somebody because you intend to punch them in the head?
Now, on the question of brutality, when you're in the ring with another fighter, what is your intention? Is it to hurt him?
Not exactly to hurt him, but you're in there trying to win the fight.
I fought Bud Smith, and in the 9th round, I believe, I had him against the ropes, but his ear was bleeding so badly. His right ear. And I kept hitting him, and I kept hitting him, and I was hoping, I was conscious of that. I was hoping that the referee would stop it, because I didn't want to hit him anymore.
The protagonists, those that wish boxing to continue, have to be honest and say, look, boxing is dangerous. But then we have to try and decide how dangerous.
The only thing I can ever remember being said, yeah, it makes you punchy. Nobody said, well, wait a second, what does punchy mean?
These are not actors you're going to see. They're real fighters who were once top names in the ring. What's your name?
My name is Joey Grapp.
How old are you?
I'm 57 years old.
How many fights have you had, Joey?
I had 243 fights.
You ever fight any champions?
I fought so many I forgot who I fought.
Brain damage in boxing can be, again, quite clearly divided into two types. Acute brain damage, chronic brain damage. Acute brain damage is, in nearly all cases, due to a thing called a subdural hemorrhage. If you start bleeding in that gap between your brain and your skull, what happens then, there's a sudden catastrophic pressure change, and boom, it all falls apart.
Red flags to the canvas. Benny went down not from any one punch, but from an accumulation of punches. Dr. Schiff says let him alone, he'll probably be all right, no cause for excitement.
The chronic brain damage is just the cumulative effect of blows that are going to hit you, they're not going to knock you out, you keep boxing, you walk into another and another, and changes occur within the microscopic structures of the brain.
Damaging the front part of your brain will damage your ability to make good decisions. And they won't recognize that they're troubled.
Richardall should not be taking these shots. Thank God.
I was close to getting the shot at the middleweight title. And as long as I was winning, I didn't pay no attention to the effects that I had, or the wounds, or whatever you want to call it. After 1981, man, my eye just started going bad. I got thumbed in the right eye, and I got another one in the left eye. And I went and I saw Dr. Chenoweth in Portland, Oregon. And I went into his room. The lights were so bright, I couldn't see nothing. He looked at me, and he estimated that I was blind 18 months. I was boxing blind for 18 months. I didn't know it. Why? I was winning. Winner never sees no flaw.
The Medical Advisory Board has informed us that the battery of tests to which you've been subjected, you've passed these tests with flying colors. However, this commission, in good conscience, cannot recommend you for a license.
I mean, maybe you're doing your job, but why you gotta stop me from doing mine? Because if you're willing to go through all the battling you gotta go through to get to where you want to get, who's got the right to stop you? I mean, maybe some of you guys got something you never finished, something you really want to do, something you never said to somebody, something. And you're told no, even after you pay your dues. Who's got the right to tell you that? Who? Nobody.
Vasily Jarov was my opponent March 13th, 2004. I dominated the whole fight till 12 seconds left in the 9th round, where I was hit with a shot behind the head. And from then on, the story's kind of foggy.
And down goes Macy on a right hand across the top. And Macy badly hurt now as Jarov goes to the body. That's the Jarov stock and trade. And Macy goes down.
After the fight, I had some headaches, for a couple of days. So we went to our local doctor and got some MRIs, and they found the injury, they found the problem.
I went to see the finest neurosurgeon in the world with Joe, and he laid it right on the line. You're gonna have to be here in Boston for several days, Mr. Macy. And I said, we'll stay a month. I'm his father. I got to know these things. I got to know if he's okay or not.
I didn't seek out Joe Macy. He sought out me. He came to me for an opinion. Technically, Joe had what we call a subdural hematoma.
And that's a type of brain hemorrhage where the very thin, fragile blood vessels on the surface of the brain, as the brain twists around inside the skull, these get stretched and twisted and they can rip. And when they rip, they don't spurt blood, they ooze.
He's not more susceptible to have a subdural hematoma because the vein that broke is gone and therefore can't cause him more trouble in the future.
The Nevada Commission is the only commission in the world that has this one-line rule that says you cannot fight if you've ever had a history of a subdural hematoma. We have the neurosurgeons with the credentials and the family and the fighter saying we're okay. That should be enough.
I think the tests that we're taking, first of all, are not adequate. There's got to be some different type test. I mean, you can see a boxer who can pass every test, and you can see him stumbling in the ring, has no coordination, but still he passes the test.
I went to UCLA Medical Center and got on all the machines, kidney, brain, thyroid, urine, blood, all kinds of tests. 3 days, okay. Then I went to Mayo Clinic, the boss of all clinics, Mayo, stayed 2 days, A1. Do I sound like I have brain damage? I'm not making excuses. I think it helped me because I didn't went around. I was too weak. I didn't throw it people. This is why the woman retired.
Legally, in a court of law, you know, lawyers, judge wants to use hard data. And if someone's passed their test, they want to say, well, you put them through all these tests, then they should be able to fight. Give them their license. Well, if you want to let fighters fight that shouldn't be in the ring any longer, then just use tests as your only criteria.
Ali's very last fight, and it was one day after training that Angelo asked me confidentially, says, Manuel, I feel that Ali should quit. His reflexes have slowed down. What do you think? And I agreed with him.
He wasn't there. He was in no shape. People said, why don't you tell him to retire? Well, I never played God with fighters. I told Muhammad, you do what you want to do with your life, son. That's what he should do. It's his life.
I got more sense than anybody. Who can handle you like I'm handling you now? Brain damage.
He had Parkinson. He had Parkinson before he stopped fighting. But the Parkinson affects his movement.
And the ex-champ has to hold on. Ali in his own corner is being battered. Ali looks like he's getting very tired.
It looked to us at ringside that, you know, you were slow, you were telegraphing your punches. The eyes could see it, but the physical ability just couldn't get it there.
It wasn't from boxing. It's not a disease affiliated with boxing. If a doctor can tell me that, I'll say amen.
Dementia pugilistica comprises several different things, but you don't have to have all the parts. One of the things are problems that lead to Parkinsonian-like symptoms. It's not Parkinson's disease, but it's Parkinson's symptoms. This particular part is most dramatic in what is called bradykinesia, which means slowness of initiating a movement. Best example of this is, of course, Muhammad Ali.
It's tough to foresee a tragedy. I hope we could foresee it and prevent it, because who wants a guy to get hurt?
Does that mean that he can't be hurt in the ring? Absolutely not. Any boxer can be. The question is, are they at greater risk?
I don't want to get into statistical arguments of if, buts and maybes, it could be this, it could be that. The bottom line, it bled once, it could bleed again. If it bleeds again, it may be a catastrophic bleed that makes Joe dead.
It was kind of a freak incident that had happened. I don't think his anatomy is any different than the rest of ours to make him more susceptible to that form of injury.
It's very probable that the very small amount of bleeding that Joe had happens in fighters more often than we're aware of. And it is true that a study done some years ago of boxers that had dementia pugilistica, the majority of them had evidence of intracranial bleeding.
He had a brain bleed. That should be the end of your career. He's a smart guy. He's a very good-looking guy. So I really don't understand why he would even continue to fight.
How can you stop an athlete from, or anybody, from earning his living.
You can't tell the kids stop. It's like cutting off circulation, like stopping living.
It can't be the what if, it's what is that I'm healthy now. I don't want to risk my life, not for anything. But it has to be handled case by case. I think boxing is my right.
If you can listen to the physicians at the American Association of Ringside Physicians, they will tell you the highest mortality rates are fighters whose fathers are in the corner.
The Gillette Cavalcade of Sports is on the air.
Moyer should prove whether or not Sugar Ray still has it. The 22-year-old from Portland, Oregon, has won 30 of his 35 fights, scoring 8 knockouts.
Denny Moyer was a more visible fighter at that time, during that era, and fought better opposition. And they didn't make him any better than Phil, of course, but he was exposed more at that time in his boxing career, so much more than Phil.
Young Moyer had never gone 10 rounds before. He was in against a very tough guy. This 19-year-old boy from Portland, Oregon, and the crowd here loved him.
Well, Denny Moyer fought in the 50s and 60s. And because of television, their faces became as familiar to us as what we see in the mirror, shaving every morning. You knew them like you would know the starting lineup of your favorite baseball team or football team.
Remember that at that time they had the Friday night fights and Wednesday night fights, and it almost would seem like Denny was fighting every other week on television. And he was a beautiful fighter to watch.
Boxer, puncher, agile. He was a very pleasing fighter.
In my opinion, he was a good fighter. Although I beat him, but he's still a good fighter to me. His name and my name helped me make some good money.
Tonight we bring you the 10-round welterweight bout between Emil Griffith of New York. His opponent is Denny Moyer of Portland, Oregon. Both boys have fast hands. Nice right hand scored by Moyer. It's a tough fight. Both boys taking turn launching attacks.
Phil never fought as much as Denny did. He didn't have that many fights. He didn't have the heart to be a fighter. And I think he just did it for his dad.
Sid would get me a ticket and I'd go with him. I'd work with him in the corner. Well, you're trying to get him to do the right thing, you know. Tell him what's wrong, what he's doing wrong, and what he should do. Which punches are counting the most.
Phil did anything in the world for his dad. Anything. He couldn't hurt his dad's feelings come hell or high water.
Somebody's beating up my dad. I was terrified. You know, everybody's clapping and I don't understand why. I think, you know, how could they be clapping? They're hitting each other.
Phil felt trapped, yeah.
You gotta go in there and you gotta have the animal instinct. You gotta kill him. Completely against anything he wanted. He was too good.
When I started boxing, I was just a kid with family issues and angry and needed an outlet. I didn't like people. I didn't want to play with other people. I didn't want to talk with people. I didn't want to get along and be a team player. So I got used to just the adversity of life, just things being so hard, that I make them hard to make it feel easier for me. I don't feel a lot of support from family or friends through my accomplishments in boxing. Boxing was my family. It gave me all the feelings that I didn't get. I'm not comfortable with peace. I'm not comfortable with comfort. I want to fight it.
Did she ever hurt you in the fight?
No.
Land any? Not at all?
She did hit his head, but
Cleanest
I
shot
don't
she
think
had?
she landed. She might have landed one punch.
That's it?
Yeah, I think so.
When most fighters achieve a certain level, they get a certain level of acknowledgement back. Kelsey hasn't got that acknowledgement more or less back off the huge public, because the huge public don't know her. Whatever is inside her, just beyond just wanting to achieve at a sport, that's making her want to fight, is questions she's asking of herself. And she obviously feels there's more out there for her, so.
Boxing can be quite clearly split into two sports: professional boxing and amateur boxing.
Well, professional boxing is a business, amateur boxing is a sport. Amateur boxing suffers from its affiliation or its likeness of professional boxing.
When you're talking the big difference between amateur and professional is that a professional boxer is doing it for a living. He's doing it to make money.
For a lot of the kids that I work with, the outlet of boxing provides them with a channel for their enthusiasm, their emotions and their aggressions that might go to different areas.
I worked in gang prevention and with at-risk youth, and discovered that a lot of the kids we were trying to target were really into boxing.
Boxing is fighting. It's a macho image, the same kind of image that a kid in a gang wants. So you can attract kids and you can teach them that life can be good.
It teaches them a lot about themselves, it teaches them a lot about respect for themselves, respect for others, just respect for society in general. You know, they get a framework in which to operate that they're not going to learn elsewhere.
I bet you couldn't tell me the most common cause of death in boxers in the year 2005, those that died. Well, the most common cause of death was being shot, and the second most common cause of death was being stabbed. And being in the ring fighting was a far distant third.
I think it's child abuse to allow your teenager to engage in sports that put them at risk for a brain injury.
Amateur boxing, actually, we're about the safest of all the contact sports.
Amateur boxing rules are the same all over the world. In professional boxing, they change from one state to the other.
We have very short 3 or 4 round bouts. Duration, and the longest duration we have is 2 minutes in a round. You know, the whole thing is geared for the safety of the athlete because we are a sport.
These two gloves here, what I have is 2 10-ounce gloves. This is a professional boxing glove. This is an amateur boxing glove. The amateur glove is made with 4 layers of foam that is made to actually absorb a blow rather than to deliver a harmful blow. This glove, on the other hand, which is a pro glove, I can squeeze this here to where there's less than 1/4 of an inch now between my thumb and index finger, where this one here, I can't do that. I'm probably closer to 2 inches on the punching surface of the glove. Amateur boxing to me has become a huge program in cultivating a young person's life way beyond getting in the ring. Out of my boxing gym, I go between 400 to 500 kids a year that come through that door. And hopefully through this process of learning how to box and more so being a role model and providing opportunity, they'll grow up to be good kids and not professional boxers.
We're boxing under the rules of the New York State Athletic Commission. I expect a clean fight. Obey my commands at all times. Shake hands, come out boxing at the bell. Good luck, 10 rounds.
When Jarrell got knocked out that first round, I immediately jumped up and I ran towards the ring. Looking in there, I'm thinking, okay, his legs aren't moving. All I'm concerned about is my husband alive in that ring?
Some of the tapes, you see the guy win and the overwhelming joy, and he turns and realizes that his opponent hasn't got up. And those are some of the most chilling things you will ever see in boxing, because the guy who's on the canvas and the guy who's standing up, the winner, it could easily have been reversed.
A punch that will knock somebody out is a punch that will cut off the circulation to the brain or stop the circulation to the brain for a period of time. The location will determine what the result is.
Right here, behind the ear, or sometimes even in the temple, because it rattled the brain.
That was a free shot and a painful one.
There are so many different theories about the knockout. If you hit somebody straight in the head and knock the head back that way, it's not going to knock them out. If you hit them that way, consciousness is lost immediately.
I always say a knockout can happen as quick as you blink your eye. Some of them are scary. You never know if you're going to wake up.
The closest I got to thinking that I had a major tragedy was the second Johansson-Patterson fight at the Polo Grounds. At 1:51 of the 5th round, Patterson threw a sensational left hook, probably the most vicious left hook ever in the ring. His leg was quivering. He was on his back. He must have been on his back maybe for about 10 or 11 minutes, maybe more, I don't know.
The greatest amount of damage that occurs to boxers is when they're in that defenseless state. The acceleration forces which can be transmitted to the head are markedly accelerated when the neck is limp.
the actual damage caused by the knockout, it's that swiveling motion of the cortex and the brain stem.
The heavy hemispheres of the brain and the brain stem for microseconds are kind of going in different directions, and some of those nerves get stretched, some of them get torn. So those are probably the punches that can create the subdural hematomas that we see.
I think Tony knew that he was hurt. I saw him on the way to class the next morning. He told me verbatim, he says, "I can't get rid of this fucking headache. I can't get rid of it." I packed up my bag and I went to the gym that night at 6:30 to meet him. And that's when I had seen him in the back of the ambulance, unconscious. He had decided to show up a half an hour earlier at the gym. He sparred another one of our light heavyweights who was a very good fighter, and took a few shots to the head, and apparently the small bleed that had started the night before turned into an absolutely massive bleed.
Headgear gives a false sense of security. It almost never fits well. The weight of the headgear gets heavier as someone starts to sweat.
You can still knock people out. Headgear has nothing to do with whether you're going to knock somebody cold or something.
Becky Zerlantis was in the Colorado Golden Gloves last Saturday in Denver when she was knocked down and unconscious by a right hand in the third round. The coroner's office said has ruled that her death was caused by blunt force trauma.
And so when you take a young boy whose neck isn't real strong and you put an extra 10 ounces on it, I don't know. I'm not sure that's a real good thing or not.
Now, it doesn't matter how big the head guard is. In fact, the bigger the head guard, the bigger the lever. So if you stick padding out on the end of the chin, your chin is actually out here. So the lever with which you're going to turn the head is made longer. So head guards potentially predisposed to knockouts rather than prevent.
And they told me that Tony was on the operating room, that he had suffered a massive brain hemorrhage, a subdural hematoma. And he was in surgery when I called.
When he was in the OR and they actually drilled into his head to relieve the pressure of the bleed, there was a phenomenal amount of pressure once they relieved it, that blood squirted out of his head and hit the wall of the OR theater. What I was told anyway, there was that much pressure in his skull at the time.
In my mind, I didn't think he was going to live through it. 2 hours later, the neurosurgeon comes out. He said, "Your son has only a few hours to live." I prayed to God, and I said, "God, I'll take it back any way you want to give it to me. You're not desperate. You want to cling on to it." And I'm grateful to God that he kept it with us.
Denial is a very strong emotion. Actually, nothing happened while they were boxing, and actually Denny didn't take any bad punches. I mean, you could just hear it going on and on easily as a self-protective mechanism, if nothing else.
You know, Denny wanted to fight. I think it was a case of Denny being good at what he was doing, and Harry probably believed that he was very capable of protecting himself and had no knowledge, absolutely none, of the permanent damage that this was creating. We had 140 fights, and in his last 2 years, he had 22 fights, and these were tough fights. He was a trial horse. Vito Antuofermo is a classic example.
Denny Moyer, 35 years old. He's had 131 fights, but I don't think this is any layoff or comeback. I think he's kept fighting. In the corner with him is his father on the outside of the ropes, Harry Moyer. Denny also had a brother, Phil, who fought years ago, but retired.
Harry says to Denny, you can go out and take this guy. And Denny says, this kid doesn't know how hard he can hit.
I don't think he came in to really fight me in that fight. He came in to survive. I think it was like one of my biggest stepping stone at the time. I was coming up then. I wanted to fight by big margin.
That left hook of Antuofermo's is just a little bit too fast for Denny. Moyer's getting quite a going over in this round, Floyd.
Well, there's one thing we can say about Moyer. He takes a good punch.
Oh, he's just walking in on him now.
Trauma in and of itself changes the way the cells carry on their genetic business, express different genes when they've been traumatized than when they haven't been.
As doctors and as people who administer the sport, we need to know which boxer is at risk, who's going to come to harm, how do we identify them.
By the time the fighter is starting to show problems, it's too late. You know, it's become this rock that's falling down a hill that you can't stop. So the trick is to determine when is the point to call it quits.
He says, it's about time for me to stop. He says, I go in and I can fall asleep on the dressing table before the fight. He says, that's time to get out. He was getting to a point where he was ring-wise and he wasn't getting up for the fights. You have to be at your peak performance on that night. And it was getting where he's lackadaisy in his training. You know, he was getting older. You start getting worried.
Professional boxing causes chronic brain damage in some individuals, but not all individuals. And that's where we have the problem.
I do think that some people can absorb punishment better than others, but you know, the thing is, we don't have that choice, so I think we're born with it.
And George Chuvalo, he suffered some of the most savage blows in boxing history. I mean, from big guys, too. I mean, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, all of those guys.
I have a reputation for absorbing a lot of punishment. I have a reputation for getting hit with a lot of punches. I took a lot of shots, but a lot of the shots I took also were negated by the fact that I could roll them or duck them. And I didn't get hit by the full force of a lot of punches.
For people who have a certain gene, it's called the ApoE4 gene. Boxers who have the gene show cognitive impairment after their 11th fight.
And there's some others that seem to be relatively spared of any problems from having been in boxing for a number of years.
The Pro Boxing Brigade will tell you that boxing doesn't cause brain damage, all right? So they have their heads in the sand, blissfully ignorant of all the evidence that's around. They say, no, it doesn't happen. The abolitionists say every boxer will get brain damage. Right, now, somewhere between the two is the truth.
Klitschko has a doctorate in sports science. Williamson, as mentioned, a master's, so both should be smart enough to know that this is all about. Williamson, a 6'3", 36-year-old, 4-year pro.
He's beaten the people he's supposed to beat.
Oh, my! He's down! A straight right hand. Klitschko down.
6, 7. You okay?
He got up fast. It's a flash knockdown. He's just stunned out of nowhere. And now a confident Williamson goes back to it.
What happens later in fights?
And Margaret Goodman stepping in, the doctor.
They may have clashed heads toward the end of that round.
I think they did. That's what happened.
That's a big one. Yeah, you can't handle that.
Oh, you can handle it. Come on.
No.
No, that's...
Yeah, let's go.
The doctor makes the determination. It is a nasty cut, very deep, and the blood is going into the eye.
There's a headbutt right there. I saw it clearly.
And the cut went below the level of the brow,
down to where one of the nerves goes to control part of the pupil, so we want to stop it.
Let's bring in DeVero. You acquitted yourself here very well tonight. You were able to knock Klitschko down here in that 4th round. Did you feel as though you were ahead when you went to the scorecards?
This is really unfinished business. I don't think that Vladimir could raise his hands. I don't think that I could necessarily raise our hands and feel confident that this was a win or a loss.
It ends unceremoniously, unfortunately, with a cut. So a very incomplete night.
This might be one step up above the barbershop. You know what I'm saying?
When I first met DeVero, I didn't think he was a boxer because of his character. He's so cool and laid back. Until I saw him knock a fool out, then I knew that he had that fighter instinct in him, man.
No disrespect. It's just a rush. It's like a high.
The limelight, the crowd cheering.
Yeah, the crowd cheering. That's it.
Once
man.
It's gone, it's over.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
In my opinion, what motivates DeVero is because he said that he was going to do it, and so he wants to accomplish it. And in most cases, 38 is 38, and just about all of his critics, nobody thinks he can do it. So that motivates a lot of guys more.
And sometimes with my wife, it's you know, it's a roller coaster. It's an emotional roller coaster. She's certainly the backbone of our family, so she stomachs a lot of it.
My main thing is that you care so much about this person that's in that ring that any and every emotion, anything that's going on inside, it's all in there with that person. And so once boxing's over and done with, is he going to be able to play with our children the way he's wanted to? Is he going to be the father that he's always wanted to be? Like he said, they are gladiators. They're in there to do this, and some of them until death. They don't know when enough is enough sometimes, and so when you start seeing signs or anything, I think it's the responsibility of the family or whoever is closest to them to say, you know, champ, you know, it's been a great ride, it's been great to us, it's time for us to move on.
How my wife feel, she wish I don't, but she's with me if I'm gonna do it. But she wish I don't. She tried to talk me out of that, but it's impossible.
Step press. Step press. Step press. Come on. Step press.
I'm willing to sacrifice, you know, my life for my family. I really want to become the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, I don't have to be the heavyweight champion of the world for 4 or 5 years. I have to be the heavyweight champion of the world once and defend it once or twice and, you know, right off into the sunset.
I know I can still go. I wouldn't embarrass myself, my family, my whole image, my religion, and go out getting hurt. I love myself more than you do. How can people care more about me than me? I analyze this whole thing. I'm gonna win. I'm still ready.
For the 10 or 15 or maybe 20 years you've been involved in it, you've been doing nothing else. So when you take that away, what's left?
Most fighters don't have anything to fall back on because they put everything into boxing, like I did. But after boxing, what, you know, I'm going to sell things on telephone. I can't even speak that well.
We'd all like to be dignified financially by having, say, a nice pension or something. We don't have that.
The fighter comes out on the short end of everything.
They have no support. They have no backup. And our commodities, which we cheer for, we don't help once the cheering has ended and is over.
It might be an animalistic sport, but we're humans.
For God's sake, if the United States has a retirement plan for the Greyhound racing dogs, why can't they do it for the fighters? You're talking about human beings that are basically put out to pasture with no resources.
You want to know how I met Bruce?
You don't have to tell him that.
I don't have to tell him?
No, you don't have to tell him that. Otherwise, I'll tell him about the night you got kidnapped.
Okay, then that's it.
The thing is trust for a fighter. We have an ethic where we say something, you got it. She's got a dream. What is she going to do when she don't fight anymore? She needs She needs a support system. She needs people like him and I that have that kind of empathy and compassion for the human being, not just because they're an athlete. You don't find that anymore.
I think as much as Kelsey would always give 100% anyway, because she's doing it for herself, I think she gives an extra 100 on top of that then because she wouldn't want to let Bruce down. I think it's most definitely just he cares about her and he's got her back because there's no financial gain in it. That's a huge, huge bonus to any fighter. I trust Bruce 100%. There ain't too many like him out there.
Better than a father, better than a manager, better than your best friend. He wouldn't take anything from me. He would never exploit me, which is the boxing business, is to exploit fighters. He basically came in and just basically took all the headache away. To do it on my own, I just don't know if I could do it. It's just me and him. Nobody wants to do us any favors. Everybody wants something for free. Nobody cares about me, about him. And he's willing to be there with me and push with me and fight with me. And that's important to me.
I mean, anybody that gets in the ring has a special, there's something about them, that they have that courage to get in. Fighters get jittery, you know, in the dressing room. Sometimes they throw up, sometimes, you know, they get diarrhea. Because nobody knew what was going through your head. Only you knew. I will be as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. With reasonable men I will reason, with humane men I will plead, but to tyrants I will give no quarter, nor waste arguments where they will certainly be lost. When that bell rings, it's every man for himself. I'm not asking you to give me any breaks or cut me any slack or let up. And we're not asking for any favors. They're going to war, actually.
He was in a coma for more than a month. I'm astounded that he survived this thing.
I mean, he was down to skin and bones by the time we got him home. He had to learn how to chew, how to swallow. He was paralyzed on his right side. No doctor can tell you if he's going to get it back.
He also has tremendous difficulty in committing anything to long-term memory. So each and every new day truly is a new day with the past completely forgotten.
How is he going to handle comparing himself what he was to what he has become? If I had been involved in encouraging him to do that and this had happened, I would have a very, very difficult time with the guilt feelings.
As far as the indicators that someone has developed dementia pugilistica or a punch-drunk syndrome, they may not exhibit any symptoms for 10, 15 years till when their career is over. So often an Alzheimer's patient or a demented patient is the last one to know that they're getting demented. It's your family or people around you that talk to you, that ask you the right questions, will start to know.
Probably as early as in his 50s. Maybe even sooner. Things weren't... it'd be little things that he'd do. And it just got to be scary.
His mind he started thinking weird things, and he was not Phil anymore.
The symptoms of dementia pugilistica initially, a shorter fuse, judgment tends to be a problem. They also get lost more easily because the direction area of their brain starts to become damaged. Sometimes they can even be paranoid.
When it happens gradually, you don't really notice it right away. He was saying, "Do you think you'd ever leave me?" And I make a joke out of it and say, "Why, what are you going to do?" And he was realizing at one time that there were some things going on. I told him that we had to take him someplace where I said, "The medication that you're taking, it's making you a little dizzy and that. I have to take you someplace and leave you there for a while till they can get this medication out. That was the hardest thing on me because he trusted me and he thought he was coming back home. And we knew he wasn't.
I took him to one of the first facilities we tried to get him in and dropped him off. And he cried. He said, "Please don't leave me here." And I said, "I have to, Dad. It's for your best. We don't know how to take care of you any better. And I wouldn't do this if I didn't have to." He said, "But just don't leave me here. Can't I come stay with you?" I said, "I can't do it."
To me, it's just like life is a fight. Sometimes the fight is about Kelsey. I'm in there fighting about me, my issues, my life, my past, my future, fighting to try to heal myself. If I was a surgeon and I was fighting for somebody else's life, that would be my fight. But I chose boxing, and I chose to fight my fight in a ring and to deal with the consequences of doing that. I'm willing to pay the price, unfortunately, to do what I love if that were to occur.
I was 29 when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, 2 years after I retired. We usually make the wrong choice and we pay for it later, but I don't blame boxing for anything bad because I chose it.
They knew the risk because they knew the reward, or they knew that was the only thing they could do.
It's not that they don't care, and it's not that they haven't thought about it. They've accepted it. Once you've accepted it, you put it out of your mind.
I have documentation says I'm legally blind. I can't see worth a darn. But hey, who's to tell me that?
If you regret your past, you regret what you become. But the less those fighters are in control of their own body and their own decisions, I'm much happier than seeing them as victims rather than champions.
Victim, no. A victim has to be victimized. A victim has to be taken advantage of. A victim has to be almost forced, I think, into something or coerced into something you don't want to do. Then you're a victim. None of that applies. But casualty, oh, yeah. And there's a bunch of them out there, I'm sure.
Jeff was a major concern with us. We not only had Tony's situation that we were dealing with, but Jeff emotionally was a mess. I was afraid that he might be suicidal.
It was very painful. I had hoped that there would be some sort of a glorious recovery that he had undergone, and unfortunately his recovery was measured in grains as opposed to buckets. The guilt kind of magnified when I put myself in Pete's shoes because I'm a father now, and what he must have gone through. I should have not hit him so many times. I should have been there the half hour earlier and seen to it that he didn't get in the ring. I catalyzed a very bad thing to have happened to a wonderful person in Tony. And that doesn't sit right with me. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
Hey, Jeff.
Good to see you.
Good to see you,
How you
buddy.
doing?
Pretty good for home, man. Bulking up to get bulkier and bulkier.
Trying to stay the same.
No, you got to for your...
yeah, good job.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Look good.
How you doing?
How are you? Good to see you.
What's Tom?
He's out doing his books.
Oh.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. I don't know if you remember me.
I remember.
I'm Jeff.
Jeff Raymond?
Yeah. Hey, good to see you.
How have you been?
I'm doing okay.
What
What you working on?
Well, my mom used to be a Grace English teacher. So I work from 9 to 3 every day. So Monday, Wednesday, he's from Shepherd. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm back to the issue passes. I do my workbooks to give them teacher's helper.
Good deal. Oh, that's great. Good deal. We met back in March. I've never been more impressed with a family and people in general. And I saw you age In the 3 months after Tony was hurt, I saw you age 15 years each.
We've never held you responsible because
Could've been
my
anybody.
rationale was that it could have been just the other way around. Just as easily it could have been the other way around. You could have been in Tony's situation and vice versa.
I'm glad to see him. Don't feel guilty about my injury, because it could have been anybody. It was just like say he was in the wrong place, wrong time. It shows that the results of the situation didn't separate us or didn't cause any friction between us.
It was just something we were both drawn to. We were young kids in the ring trying to hurt each other, and we did. It's just good to see you again.
Same here.
He told me, he says, I wished I'd never even pushed him into that far. He says, I didn't know this was gonna be like this.
Those were his boys. And he blames himself in a way, and we kept on telling him, it's not your fault.
He loved those boys so much.
All these fighters when Denny was elected to the Hall of Fame of boxing, they signed these. They were all in there. Yeah, but I don't think it's worth it. You know, the way he is now, he's in a rest home. And he knows me, but you have to remind him who you are. How you been? Huh? Doing pretty okay, huh? Yeah. Nice and warm in here, isn't it? Can you walk fine? You're walking all right.
Yeah.
Do you do much walking?
Yeah.
It's too cold outside. Pretty soon it'll be warm as summer comes along. You can be outside a lot. What's the matter, Phil? I wonder if he's hurting. Yeah, you're all right. Yeah. Here's a...
Well, just think how tough a question that is. Did I see the potential demise and terrible physical impairment of my own kids? How's a guy going to say yes to that?
There are those that will say that it's the father's fault, he pushed him. There are those that will say it's the boy's fault, he pushed himself too hard for his father. It may be, like I said, that it's just that father and son combinations work a lot better. I don't know. I really don't know.
It's like saying, does the good outweigh the bad? You know what I mean? Do the good parts of boxing and the excitement of boxing and the people you meet, the thrill of being a fighter, the thrill of knowing you are a fighter, would that outweigh the consequences? I don't know. It all depends on the individual.
I think it's harder for the family members than it is for Denny and Phil, because in their world, they're okay. And their world, you know, nobody is hurting. Nobody, you know, they don't know what piece is really missing.
And sometimes it takes him a while. But today I went in and he kissed me, so he knew it was me.
And Philip's like that too, and responds to his wife. I can remember a few years ago when I first started here, whenever he would get upset, he couldn't remember her name, but he would know that, you know, that lady. He would say to that lady, and always referred to her as that, as a lady. And he knew that it was his wife, and I'd say, are you talking about Mary? Yes. And I said, do you want to talk to her? Yes. So I dialed the number and he would talk. He hasn't done that so much recently.
You take him a Pepsi down there, and you get down, you look up at him, and I don't think he was too sure of who I was.
He needs to feel on top of the world before he stops this. It's not about wanting to prove somebody wrong, it's just about overall acceptance, period. For some reason, he thinks he's gonna find it in this ring, and I hope he does. I hope he does. I'm tired of gambling. And when I'm gambling with your life. I just don't want to see anything happen to him. I think this fight leaves us with hope, and the door's not completely closed. And now we're still open. The possibility is still out there for him to achieve the goal that he has set out to achieve. I think that it's been a good thing for us. It's still in a really good position. He will continue on, and he will maintain his rankings. And hopefully the next time you talk to us, he'll be heavyweight champion of the world. So it's all good.
But some of us tolerate cold temperatures better than others. And so evolution depends on variation.
Well, fighting has to end at some point. I don't think my body can handle it for forever. I wish it could, but it can't. I feel comfortable in the ring. I don't feel so comfortable yet in school, in classes. A little more interaction with people, which I'm not really big at. If it wasn't for Bruce, I wouldn't be in school. Because he supported me, he's rooting me on, he's cheering me on, he gave me faith that I can believe in myself, that I can do it, I can go to school. This is a new challenge, it's a new area that I'm gonna show that I'm the best at. School is forever, boxing's not.
Oh, boy.
That's downtown, right?
Tony's killing Jeff. It's his day, man.
Just when I think I'm gonna get ahead. The minute that door song, turn the page. You turn the page on and losing.
Go ahead, rub it in.
I'll get him next time. It's just a bad day.
Good attempt, good attempt.
I'll be in touch.
Bye, Jeff.
Nice to see you.
Take care.
You know, see you.
It was a very painful reunion for me. On the other hand, I see that he's still the underlying Tony he always was, remarkably happy, very upbeat. I mean, he is truly the embodiment of forgiveness.
Sometimes I just sit and marvel at him to be able to go through the day. So parts of him are still the old Tony if you look.
Anybody who wants to deny the brutality of the sport and the damage that it does to a brain is living in fantasy land. Either they're blind or they want to be blind to the effects of it. It's not an isolated case. It is not an isolated case. It's one of many.
It's hard to think back and, to what he is now and what he was back then. It's such a big, huge difference. I don't want to put no grief on anybody. The grief of death alone in the family is enough, but to go through punishment and then death is just too much.
We're all that they have between now and the end. And I just think that they all deserve a little bit more respect than they're getting.
The doctors told me about how it is. They just lose a little bit all the time, and he's not aware of it. In other words, he's living over there, but really he's dead.
Phil Moyer in the black trunks. The 23-year-old Moyer is a substitute for his brother Denny, who came down with an ear infection earlier this week. He's in the midst of a comeback campaign and has won both his bouts this year.
1 minute to go in round 10. The finish should be furious. The large crowd is applauding. Moyer finishing strong. There's the bell.
The winner by a unanimous decision, Denny Moyer.
Unanimous winner, Denny Moyer, reversing the previous decision which Robinson had over him. And very gracious Ray Robinson congratulates him in the center of the ring. We invite you to be at television ringside next Saturday night and enjoy the 15-round World Lightweight Championship match.
What must it be like to step in the ring in Madison Square Garden or whatever it is and have, 20, 30,000 people baying your name. I mean, some people would be prepared to take a few shots to the head to have that as part of their cultural memory. So maybe there's something that they've got that we'll never have.
Boxing is in a sad state simply because there are too many organizations.
Well, there used to be 8 champions, and there were 8 divisions. Now there are 17 divisions, and there are as many as 4 champions. That's 68 champions. I think I'm the only person that doesn't have a belt.
I'm still drawn to it. I'm still fascinated by it. However, consciously I realize that it's a blood sport, and it is not something that frequently has a good outcome.
I would like to see it personally abolished at every level. This society doesn't need it.
Where they can make it where it'll be illegal or whatever, people will always love to see 2 human beings try to beat each other up.
As a physician, if society determines something is going to be done, then I want to make it as safe as humanly possible.
The more work we do in terms of making boxing safer, the more work we've got left to do.
Boxing will always be around, but unless you have somebody trying to protect the fighters, it's just going to continue like it is, which isn't good enough. It's just not.
You have to be a special individual to be involved with the sport of boxing, and those who are sacrifice more than just their bodies, and that's the hardest part about boxing, is making sense out of it.
I'll risk a lot, but that's what boxing is, it's risks, but I'm not going to risk my life because I have a lot to live for and many other opportunities outside the ring.
I've said it many times, you know, after boxing, Joe's still going to be my son, I'm still going to be his father. And that's what a lot of boxers haven't had around them. Someone who cares about them more than a money-making machine, protects their welfare, their money, their future.
There's other ways to make a living. It's not good for a family, it's not good for the kids, it's not a healthy way of life.
There are people dying in Africa by the score, and people are concerned about boxing. This is what I say to those people who are against it. Get a life.
Because it's what I'm good at. It gives me confidence. It makes me feel important. That's what I do. That's what Kelsey's good at. I'm good at something.
We fought our way up the mountain, and many never made it to the top. And then some of us reached our peak, and we didn't want to stop. Like all pursuits filled with danger, some people say, why do it at all? For us, in that moment in our lives, it was a moment to stand tall. And whatever the reason, we made the choice. We want to find some sense in the consequence, whether right or wrong, to try to make it right. We fought for the world, but sometimes it's hard to tell what we did for ourselves. We want no excuses or apologies. We just want to keep our dignity. We fought for the world. Now, world, will you fight for us?